Sunday, December 5th, 2021, the second Sunday of Advent. The Gospel today presents the beginning of the preaching ministry of John the Baptist, after the pattern of the Old Testament prophets. My thoughts are captivated by the description of his personality. John is just a voice. Why would someone be referred to as a voice? It is a narrative that gives ultimate significance to the voice and its content, without getting distracted by the figure of the person. The voice vanishes after the utterance without leaving a trace. John goes without leaving a trace. The one to leave the trace is the one who comes after him, the Messiah. The location of his preaching, the desert, is also significant. The desert experiences of Israel at Sinai and of Jesus after his baptism are vivid in our minds. It is a lonely place where one is in the company with only oneself. All the conversations take place within, rather than with another person outside. In those lonely moments, all the demons and angels inside of us will display themselves in full plume with all their attractions. The desert experience forces one to discern and to find one's core. Israel was tempted in the desert. They made their gods, desired slavery more than freedom in the Lord, rejected the God who saved them, and rebelled against him there in the desert. A generation of Israelites fell into the traps of that desert. So why would John invite people to such a place for conversion? Well, it is not the tempting desert that John calls us to, but the discernment desert. Jesus was tested in the desert too. He was tempted so much as to make stones into bread, tempted with the futility of his suffering, tempted to vain glory and power. But he discerned his thoughts and listened to the voice of the Lord, rather than looking for temporary consolation or advantages. In the desert, he won over that temptation and all the other temptations that followed in the desert of the rest of his life. The desert experience was also a formative period for Israel. The disobedience and rebellious among them did not make it to the fulfillment of the promise. God made his covenant with Israel, and they pledged that they would have only one God and obey all his laws. John reminds us to go to the desert to discern and to renew our lives, to prepare for the covenant to be sealed by the blood of Christ. He is preparing the way of the Lord, inviting us to level the mountains and fill the valleys. He prepares a straight path for the Lord. The quote from Isaiah is one of hope, and the prophet does not seem to intend any spiritual meaning to the physical leveling of hills and the filling of the valleys. But when John quotes them, they reach a deeper, symbolic meaning of leveling the hills in our spiritual realms that prevent the entry of the Lord. The valleys become spiritual vacuums that have not been bridged. John's voice in the desert to level the hills and fill the valleys is an invitation to recreate the spiritual atmosphere within us. Some hills are created by stagnation, which some try to counter with false optimism. When asked, "How are you?" they courteously respond, "Great," while they really languish inside or are dull on so many fronts. It is a toxic positivity, as Adams Grant put it, covering up one's real emotions with repeated lies. Some develop risky dams by cutting the flow of life. They pent up emotional forces by preventing them from flowing into others without sublimation or diversion. There are those in the valleys of depression, finding nothing to fill the chasm. John's Gospel asks us to level the hills, to fill the valleys, and to divert the dams. That is the secret to recapturing the joy of the Lord. But how do we do this? Connecting with our inner self and finding the inner propensity for joy is the right start. It also requires identifying and removing toxic positivity and depressing denials. Finally, we must recognize our vulnerabilities and our fault lines, and then fortify them through the right relationship with God and with neighbor.